Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, but as I also like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And here we are once again in Studio 1 of the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society, and really have a special treat today. Have two friends, two fabulous musicians who are going to talk about some great music in their lives, but also some shared experiences playing music overseas. Bob Perilla, who we go back a long way. Thanks very much for being here, Bob.
Happy to come along.
And Ira Gitlin, thank you so much for...
Glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you. And you guys have played music together for quite some time.
We've known each other a long time and shared some good gigs together, and we both play independently of each other. I mean, I would say we're both honestly working professionals, and we do as many things as we can.
Well, I have a lot of admiration for professional musicians and people out there, really making the world a better place just by playing, day in, day out. So we appreciate it. And Ira, Bob, you play guitar.
Play
mainly.
Guitar and bass.
And bass, and Ira, you play?
Well, I play banjo and guitar and bass, and whatever I'm needed for, I'm glad to do it. So when I toured with Bob, one tour I played bass, one tour I did banjo, and
yeah, very cool. I'm always jealous of that. So maybe you could just start off, Ira. So when did you start playing music? Pretty young? Did you take lessons? Was there music in your family? I mean, how did you kind of get on this path?
Yeah, I started with group guitar lessons at a local Y in 5th grade. It was folk guitar, just strumming chords and stuff. But before that, I would always sit at our piano and just pick out melodies and play around with it. So I guess at some level, music just always made sense to me.
How early do you remember fooling around on the piano?
Well, before 5th grade, I don't know. So I was maybe 8 years old, or I don't even remember when we got our piano, but it was pretty far back.
So you had a curiosity and you wanted to make music. Did your parents play?
My mother played piano. My father never learned to play anything, but he had a really nice voice, and they both loved music.
Yeah, and so then did you go on to bands, playing in different kinds of bands? What type of bands? And
yeah, I took some classical guitar lessons for a while. I played flute and piccolo in junior high school band. Never stuck with that. And then when I was just about to enter junior high school, high school rather, I got interested in bluegrass. I was already playing folk music, and I heard bluegrass, and it kind of, especially the banjo, it just kind of really, really struck me, and I built a crude banjo out of a cookie box and got the Pete Seeger book out of the library and took off from there.
That was it, huh?
Bluegrass ruined
hooked.
Both our lives.
Yes, there you
Bluegrass
go.
Ruined our lives.
Yeah, it's a friend of ours wrote a song, Bluegrass Music Has Ruined My Life, talking about taking that downward slide.
And so since then you've been basically playing music, bluegrass music primarily, but throughout your life. And
yeah, I mean, of course, I went to college and grad school, and I knocked around for a while, not really sure what to do, but I was playing all that while, and I moved down here to the D.C. area because I knew that there was a really strong bluegrass scene here. Mm-hmm. At all levels of experience, from just the amateur pickers all the way up to the top pros. So I knew I could find some place to fit in here.
Wow, cool. So Bob Perilla and I were classmates in high school, and we were on the same football team, the high school team that won the city championship of Washington, D.C. in 1970, which is a little far afield from music, but that was
a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. That was great fun. You were quite the ferocious defensive tackle.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. So we were both sort of, jocks in high school, but you were playing guitar too. So Same question. When was there music in your family? Did you
No
start?
music in my family at all. In fact, I
how did
think
you
one of the
start?
reasons that I adopted music as a passion was because it just was something my parents didn't want me to do.
Interesting.
So, it's intertwined with my still unresolved sense of adolescent rebellion.
Ah, goodness. So how did you start? Did you just pick up a guitar? I mean, I'm guessing bluegrass didn't grab you right off. You were probably playing.
No, I was
Beatles
taken up with
and-
the British invasion, and I
Uh-huh.
actually started to play drums first. And then I realized you couldn't haul those drums around and you couldn't play yourself a tune. And I started to mess around with guitar probably when I was a sophomore in high school.
Uh-huh.
And for whatever, I just never quit. And I got better and better until I started to get worse and worse. And now I am what I am.
And when did you kind of make the decision to go like full time with the music, and how did that transpire?
When I got divorced, which was quite a long time ago now, I was about 40, I had a variety of conventional careers almost, a variety of conventional employment. And when I got divorced, I said, well, now you're going to do just what you want to do. And I proceeded to do that.
Very cool. And I guess you started up your bluegrass band about then, or was that already?
I had been playing in a few bands before that. The Seder Hill Band, based out of Baltimore, which is still an operating unit. And as I gleaned a little more ability, a little more expertise, the music called to me more and more. And eventually, I just pitched my tent and said, "Let's go."
Yeah, and so your main band is
Big Hillbilly Bluegrass, which is had a long and reasonably honorable run, both in live performance, some festival performance, and a lot of international travel. I think we went to something like 30 different countries for the State Department through the years.
wow, yeah, and that's certainly one thing that we want to really focus on here. Ira, so when did you meet Bob, and how did that transpire?
I'm not sure exactly when I met Bob. It was probably within a few months of moving down here. I think it was at the first one of Tom Minty's parties that I went to.
Oh, Tom Minty.
You know Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, who is a mainstay of not just the bluegrass scene, but also traditional jazz and older styles of country music. I mean, he's got a finger in everything. And he runs Patuxent Music, which is a record label.
He just closed it.
Oh, really?
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, my friend Rick Franklin did a CD with Tom, and I think Eleanor Ellis may have had a CD that he produced. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he still is involved in all sorts of roots music, but bluegrass and old time especially, I think. Anyway,
He's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, he used to have these big parties. He would just rent a VFW hall and put out the word, and even if you didn't know him personally, if somebody had told you, you were welcome. And so I went there, and I met a lot of the people I still play with to this day, including Tad Marks, who played fiddle with Bob for a long time. He's a wonderful fiddle player. And, so I would run into Bob. I would fill in with his band sometimes at various points if they need, if somebody couldn't make it to a gig. And then at some point, he had a tour coming up with the State Department, and he wanted me to play on it, so I started playing bass with Big Hillbilly Bluegrass regularly up at Madam's Organ on 18th Street, to learn their repertoire and their whole way of doing things. And that was like end of 2006, I guess, and I played with them pretty steadily for, 6-7 years, something like that.
Ira's a great bass player.
Well, thank you.
What I'm really interested in, and I've heard some from Bob about this, is you somehow, and maybe it was through Tom that it happened, you started doing these overseas.
No, it didn't have anything to do with Tom at all.
Oh, okay, didn't have that. All right.
But it did have something to do with the Madam's Organ
It absolutely
gig, right?
had to do with Madam's Organ. And that is to say, Madam's Organ, there on 18th Street, is live music 7 nights a week, and we played there weekly for something very close to 20 years. And I think the neighborhood used to be a greater socioeconomic crossroads than it is now. But not only did you have a lot of Latinos and black folk, but you also had a lot of State Department personnel from the Kalorama district who used to come in to wet their whistle and listen to the music. And from folks in the State Department, we eventually received an invitation to tour Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia.
Wow, and what program was this that the State Department runs?
Everybody asks me that, but each of the 30 different countries that we visited, the invitation came from the individual public affairs officer at the mission. So in terms of who to call up down in Foggy Bottom to get yourself a gig, I have no idea.
So how did that really somebody invited you to go?
Well, it was back in the era of Nigerian investment opportunities coming. They would flood in by email, and I was searching for the proper Nigerian investment opportunities in my inbox one day, and there was an email headed, "Hey, do you want to go to Armenia?" And I said, well, that's a different take. And so I opened it up, and it was an invitation to go to Armenia and Azerbaijan and Georgia, although this was couched simply in terms of Armenia, but later, as arrangements were made, the tour expanded.
And so, I mean, tell us about that, how that happened, your experiences, how it started.
The first place we went was Azerbaijan, and friends, it looks and smells different than Bethesda or than anywhere right around the district. First of all, as soon as you get off of the airplane, the air is thick with petroleum pollution, and in a way that it reminded me of 20 or 30 years ago, the way things used to be, the way the air used to smell before pollution controls. People actually sell oil on the side of the road in soda bottles because it seeps up out of the ground everywhere. And it was wonderful. It was my first experience in an Islamic society, a Muslim society, although Baku, which is the capital city, had a great history as an oil boom town. It was the first place where oil was commercially extracted in the world. And
you were on this trip too?
No, I did not start doing those tours until I think you'd already done 2 or 3.
Yeah.
By that point, when was that first one? What year?
Geez, I do not remember. 2000, something like that.
Maybe, yeah. And the first one I did was in 2007.
So what was that experience like? You got your bluegrass band. You show up in this country, and where did they put you?
We actually played Baku is a great center for jazz music, and it's a center for symphonic music as well. Rostropovich is a Bakuvian. But you can make friends with music. That's the bottom line. When I first said, yes, I want to go to Armenia, yes, I want to go to Azerbaijan, I assumed, well, this is going to be quite a junket, that we're going to go and we're going to play and we're going to have a great time. But in terms of, I'd really forgotten that you can make a deep emotional connection with people through music. And through all our travels, that was affirmed each and every day. Because, and we represented a slightly different flavor of music, but for heaven's sakes, it's American music, and for better or worse, in so many ways, American culture is the world's dominant culture.
So, any examples from that first trip of people that you met, or making friends, or reactions that the folks had when you were playing?
Well, in Baku, we played at the Conservatory of Music, and of course they play. And in the conservatory there, they teach traditional music. It would be as if people were teaching 5-string banjo at Peabody Conservatory, or one of the great classical conservatories, but they teach the folk arts right next door to the symphonic music there. And we got a chance to go and interact with the people who play what is called a tar, and they play these spiked fiddles that sort of have a banjo head called a camacha. And we got to interact there. We got to enjoy their music, and they enjoyed ours. And we have a great virtuoso, was playing banjo at that stage, Mike Munford, and he simply dazzled the staff of the conservatory. It was a great memory, and there was a young gentleman who plays the tar, which is kind of like a banjo. It's got a banjo head, but it's done with a flat pick. And Mike Munford gave the kid a thumb pick. He gave the kid a thumb pick, and the kid was so thrilled. He'd never actually seen a celluloid thumb pick before. And as we were pulling off, not speeding off, but pulling off, because the traffic in Baku is unbelievable. It makes Rome look sane. As we were pulling off, the kid was standing there waving goodbye with the thumb pick draped over his thumb.
Cool.
And Mike had reached him, and he was a great player, and he had reached us. It was a remarkable confluence.
And the format Bob is describing is kind of what we did in all of the countries that we visited on the tours that I was on. Our embassy would set up our schedule, and it invariably included at least one performance where we shared the stage with a local group, and we would play our set, they would play their set, and we would play some songs together, which was really kind of interesting because in some of those countries we didn't share a common language. The African countries we did on the 2010 tour, they were all French-speaking countries, and I was able to polish up my my old high school French.
You did pretty well. You did pretty well.
The country of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, you know. But
nobody's French is that good in Africa.
Yeah, we did have translators and people from the embassy helping us out. But it's an interesting thing just to communicate with these musicians whose not just their spoken language, but their musical language sometimes was rather different, and the issue could be to find what common ground we could come up with. And I remember in Mauritania, Tad, our fiddle player, had a very astute observation. He was listening to this band that we were playing with. They were called Walfajiri. You remember them?
I remember those guys.
And they had a kind of a marimba and percussion and electric bass. So it was traditionally based, but not the hardcore traditional stuff. And Tad said, listen, they're using a lot of minor pentatonic scales, which, for listeners who don't know the music, is basically like this kind of scale you would get in the blues or in a lot of other traditional music. And Tad said, let's do Pretty Polly, which is an old murder ballad that bluegrass bands do all the time that has that kind of scale. So we did that, and it worked great.
Wow, cool.
You know, listen for the musical features and try to figure out where that common ground is.
Yeah. How many, which countries were you, I know you went to a whole bunch of them, but which were the ones that you were on, some of the ones, and what were kind of the ones that may have stood out, and, you know, any examples, instances, stories?
Yeah. The two tours that I did, the first one was in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and we were in Moldova, Croatia, the Republic of Georgia, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. And then the tour in end of 2009, beginning of 2010 was in Africa, and that was Mauritania, Togo, Republic of Congo. That's not the Democratic Republic of Congo, but the one on the other side of the river.
Congo Brazzaville.
Yeah. And Central African Republic, which of course went down the tubes shortly after we were there. Not cause and effect, I'm told.
The influence of banjo.
Yeah, right.
Bluegrass strikes again.
And that was another thing. The banjo, when we were in Africa, we made a point of every show that we played there of, you know, mentioning that the banjo, is derived from African instruments, and that a lot of people found that an interesting connection that helped them kind of appreciate what we were doing a little more.
And what do you think that they thought of the music? How did they respond to bluegrass music and what you were bringing from the American culture?
That is really interesting. What I found is that, of course, they know nothing about bluegrass except that it's some kind of American music. So in a way, they're responding to it in a sort of an unmediated, very pure sense. They're just hearing it as music. Because, in this country, even if you don't follow bluegrass and don't know anything about it, you hear it and it's just part of the soundtrack. So people know certain things. They know it's associated with the rural South. They know it's mostly white people playing it. They've got a whole set of social stereotypes that color their impression of what the music is about. And when you play in a foreign country, they don't have any of that. So they're just responding to the musical qualities. And the response has uniformly positive.
And first of all, that's a great analysis, Ira. And second of all, it really frees up the bluegrass musician because we labor in many instances under social stigma given our chosen genre of music. But to have that eliminated and just have the assessment and the response be purely musical rather than filtered through any social preconceptions was wonderful.
So the people did connect with the music.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And
any, stories, instances of that, people you met, things that happened?
When we were in the Central African Republic, Boziza, who had since been deposed, but he was the leader of the country, came and heard us play at the U.S. ambassador's residence, and he liked it so much. First of all, he danced, and he had never been seen previously to dance in public, and he liked it so well that 3 days later he ordered all the public schools in the capital city of Bangui to be closed, and everybody was summoned to the soccer stadium to hear us play.
Wow.
Which was remarkable.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was
it was
pretty
remarkable.
Amazing.
It was. And it was a resplendent new 40,000 seat soccer stadium that had been built by the Chinese. So take note, the Chinese build them a soccer stadium and the Americans send a bluegrass band to play in the soccer stadium. There's sort of a differential there, perhaps regrettable. But it was a great experience. And I would say, even though the soccer stadium was not full, there was a big crowd, a very big crowd, and perhaps in that very moment, we played bluegrass music for more black kids than Alison Krauss ever did.
Yeah, that's right. There were probably, there were several thousand people there. And
I think there were 5,000 or 7,000. I don't
like
know. I can't.
It didn't look like a lot in a stadium that big, but it was probably as big as any bluegrass festival audience I've ever played for, and then some.
Wow. Did they get into it and clap at the right times and they were dancing? Is it different than American audiences? I guess so, but how
well, there's a little less, people are not singing along with it, certainly, but the enthusiasm, and I believe that there is almost a human genetic response to hearing Foggy Mountain Breakdown played on the 5-string banjo, because it just does not fail to please. It pleases me, and I've heard it thousands of times, and it pleases someone who's never heard bluegrass before almost universally.
Well, wait a minute, Bob. It's not exactly so that they didn't sing along. For the most part,
that's right.
For the most part, they didn't. We did one song by
Peter Rowan.
By Peter Rowan, great
Midnight Moonlight
songwriter, and he did this album in the 70s, Old and in the Way, and one of his songs that was on it was his song Midnight Moonlight, which is this sort of spiritual meditation on God knows what. But and the chorus is really very simple. In the moonlight at midnight, in the midnight moonlight, something like that.
And then we performed it, and the people were very enthused. And then later on,
And they started singing along, and we saw that in Togo too when we played at the university there.
But in Bangui, after we had played it, we were not accosted, but we were approached by kids in the street who sang us the song, sang it back to us.
Wow.
I mean, this was like a couple days later.
Yeah, and Fred Cook, our ambassador in Central African Republic at the time, he said that several months afterwards, when kids would see him, and his staff in the street, they would sing that at him. Wow. So go figure.
So I mean, what do you think, either one of you, that Foggy Mountain Breakdown, whether you've heard it before or not, something really grabs you? What is it that's grabbing you? What is it that's grabbing them? What is it that makes this such a universal thing?
Well, technical proficiency is huge. People say, oh my God, listen to that. Look at him move his fingers. How does he pick so fast? If you listen to bluegrass with an open mind, the technical proficiency required to play the music properly is truly considerable.
And also, there's, like with any style of music, if you get good people playing it, there is a groove to it. And, the bluegrass groove, of course, is not the same as a jazz groove or a rock groove, but there is a groove, and if you get people hitting that, it just naturally moves people. And there's a lot of musical traditions around the world which have kind of the sound of da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, a steady stream of notes. Like when we played in Tajikistan, some of the traditional Tajik music that we heard people play, there's plucked instruments that they play with some kind of pick, and there's an underlying beat. God knows what that beat was. I could never get the hang of it. But it's like, you think you know what's going on, you try to play along with it, and oh, wait a minute, that was a measure with 7 beats in it, and God knows what. But but there's this kind of staccato plucked string sound, and you get that in in some of the African instruments. You get it in Central Asian music. You get it in Irish music, and you get it in bluegrass as well. So I think the texture of the music is something that, even if it's not universal, it's accessible to people from a lot of different cultures because they've heard something like that.
So what do you think how do the musicians generally react? The local musicians react to bluegrass, and how did you all react to their music when they played it? I mean, any thoughts about that?
I can remember specifically one of the best collaborations we did in all the tours was in Armenia, in Yerevan, the capital city. We played this huge it's difficult to describe, a place called the Cascade, but it's a big venue. It's where Cher goes to play when she has an Armenian homecoming. And we got to play with a group of folks, the Muradian brothers, who were really, really remarkably good percussionists, a fella on the tar and a fella on the kamacha, the spike fiddle. And we just had such a fruitful collaboration with them. And at some point, somebody said, hey, these guys like to play in G minor. and that's like, you listen to them play, you say, yeah, well, they're playing in G minor, so we better come up with a tune to play with them that's in G minor. And, of course, there's the great Kenny Baker tune, which is in G minor, one called The First Day in Town. And it was a remarkable collaborative piece. It was probably the best. It was a really good collaboration that we did, and boy, it brought down the house. I think I don't know how many people were there, 7,000 people, bunch of people were there, and it was a great moment, and they're very talented, and they liked our music, and we liked them too. I mean, there were enough similarities that we were able to play together, but still enough differences that we were impressed with their way of rendering it, and I think they were impressed with our way of rendering the melody in question.
Yeah, I was especially impressed with the musicians we played with in the Republic of Congo. There
bass player?
He was amazing. There were 2 bands we played with, and they were both kind of versatile bands. They did stuff that had traditional roots, but they were also killer, jazz musicians and funk musicians. And I don't remember much about the show. I mostly remember the rehearsal. There was this guest house that the embassy owned that we
The Hillbilly Boys Club.
Yes, that we all got together and worked out what we could do together, and they had some tune where I felt it there was some like a traditional banjo technique called clawhammer that worked really well. But then we did a bluegrass. Whose idea was it to do that version of Down the Road with the Bo Diddley beat? Was that Mike's idea or was that Tad's?
I think it was Tad.
Anyway, so we're doing this song Down the Road, and it's just about, like living out in the country and calling up your girl on the telephone and have her come to meet you down the road. Anyway, so at some point our fiddle player had this idea, hey, you could do that with a Bo Diddley beat.
The Bo Diddley beat is
bum 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 bum.
Down the road about a mile or two.
And then we got the backup singers. One of the bands had 3 female backup singers who didn't speak a word of English, and we got them singing in these great Afro-French accents. Down the road, in 3-part harmony, and it was wonderful. We had this extended jam with percussion in the middle of it, but these guys were just such great musicians that anything we asked them to do, they just made it sing. It was great.
Wow, God, it just sounds so fabulous. More of these types of gigs around the planet would be good. Bob, earlier you were telling me a little bit about Georgia, playing in Georgia and the Georgian people and their music and what they did, and also playing for the Pygmies, you said. Do you mind talking a little bit about those?
Well, I'm going to allow Ira to take the center stage with the Pygmies, but I will just say that I was very honored to be able to travel to the Republic of Georgia 3 times, and of all the exotic destinations, Georgia is my absolute favorite. The people are almost Mediterranean by nature. Of course, they're on the Black Sea, but they're the Georgian people are certainly the Italians of the former Soviet Empire. They make wine, they drink the wine, they gather and spontaneously sing. They have a great, passionate sense of patriotism. And as I related, as bluegrass musicians involved in something of a traditional art, if we gather to sing an old song, perhaps it's from the 19th century, maybe if you scrape on it, the 18th century, but the Georgian people gather and sing in these hugely resonant voices, these songs which date from 1000 AD, 900 AD, and they just come together at an art gallery or wherever there are a bunch of them, and spontaneously erupt into beautiful song. And I found that to be very winning indeed.
Wow, we could use a lot more of that, couldn't we?
And the food, oh my God, the best meal I had on either of those tours
Lord.
was that one banquet in I forget
Gori was on
Gori, yes,
Stalin's home city.
Yeah,
Uncle Joe is still a big tourist item in Gori.
Yeah. So, same thoughts and any other?
Well, I unfortunately the tour I was on where we were in Georgia, we were only there for 23 hours. I think we had 3 red-eye flights in the course of 48 hours. It was very disorienting, but we played a couple shows and had this wonderful meal there, and so I remember that. But you were asking about the Pygmies. Yeah. We played at a town called Mungumba, which is on the Ubangi River in Central African Republic, and
it's really remote.
Yeah,
it's honest. Yeah. It's really
remote. we crossed
the Lobai.
One of the rivers, the Lobai River, on a ferry, and it just makes you think of the African Queen with Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah. The Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, but it was there was this big clearing and a little local museum and local town officials, and there were a whole bunch of the Ba'aka, which are pygmy people there, and the pygmy folks in Central African Republic, they're kind of an oppressed minority group. They are not really treated that well by their Bantu neighbors, and they live in leaf-covered huts in the forest, and the tallest of them might have been about 5 feet tall. There was one guy there I think was came about up to my nose maybe. And they were doing on the same stage where we played. They were doing these traditional dances, which had them like imitating various animals, and they do have various musical instruments, but that produce notes. But at that performance, they were just drumming on drums and logs, and we tried to play with them. It was definitely a good photo op, but musically it didn't work that well because it sounded like they were playing this regular beat, and every time we tried to play it, we couldn't lock in with it. And we don't know if there was like some subtlety we were missing or if they were deliberately messing with us. But it was a fun experience. These are people I never would have gotten to meet.
I still remember very vividly the one dancer was dressed as an elephant, like in a green reed costume with the trunk in their dance. It was remarkable.
Yeah, we were singing this old bluegrass song, "Engineer, Reach Up and Pull the Whistle," and then 3 of the pygmy women came up and just started dancing. We've got a photo of that somewhere. Just started dancing along with it right there on stage with us. Oh yeah, it was great.
Oh my God, such great. Just sounds so fabulous. So maybe you could just sort of philosophize a bit about your trips and your experiences in light of our little mission here with the Planetary Gig Society, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. I mean, how can music, do people have that intention? How can we have more people having that intention? Does it work? What can we do to, help you use music to make a better world? I know that's a big question.
Yeah,
you guys went to a lot of places.
I'm going to take a deep breath and plunge ahead. To find musical commonality between people so widely geographically separated is a wonderful thing, and I just think that we saw demonstrations of commonality almost incessantly on our tours. I mean, we would generally, most of these tours, you'd have 1 or sometimes 2 performances a day. Sometimes they'd just be little whistle stops through villages. I remember when we were in Kyrgyzstan, we did that little village on the south shore of the south shore.
The lake
Issyk-Kul.
Yeah.
Issyk-Kul. And there was some great musicians there. And just to have people in the villages show up and listen and drink in, and you could see you were giving them joy. And then they had a performer or two that played, what's that little Kyrgyz instrument?
Oh, the one with the 3 strings.
Yeah. But the guys are
the komuz.
The komuz.
Yeah.
And we would derive joy from themselves, from their performances, and it was just an incessant parade of connections that are made, and they may be fleeting connections because I'm never going back there, and they're probably not coming over to dinner at my house, but they were real connections nonetheless.
Yeah, I think it's a burden, too much of a burden to place on music to expect it to solve all the world's problems. It's not going to. There are real, political and social problems that have to be dealt with at a large level, right, through the bigger societal institutions. But when it comes to just getting people recognizing that these other people in other countries are real people like them, I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of these people, the only Americans they see are what they see on the news or what they see on, like MTV or whatever. They see politicians, they see military people, and they see, big name millionaire performers. And there's nothing wrong with being a big name millionaire performer, Lord.
Next week.
Yeah, right. But they don't get to meet people who are just from America normally. And I think for a lot of these people, we were the first Americans and maybe the only Americans they'd ever met. And and we kind of felt that responsibility to show that hey, we like you.
at our very worst performance, I would say we're still far more effective at creating goodwill among people than any platoon of military men with M16s.
Yep.
And that's for sure. That's not to say there's no place in the world for a military, but we did just fine in that regard in terms of creating goodwill and having goodwill bestowed upon us. Having goodwill bestowed upon us, I think the only tangible difficulty that we ever experienced was at a couple times in Oman. They were not happy we were there, but that's a different story, and that was leavened by some good times.
And it's not just in foreign countries. I mean, within our country, I mean, look, we have a huge, diverse country, great diversity of musical styles, great diversity of social class and opinions. But I have seen, certainly within bluegrass, I have seen people who had little else in common bonding because they were playing music together, or because they were fans of the same music, and had that as something that they could talk about.
Oh boy, that's a good point.
Oh, it is.
That's a great point.
Pete
It's the truth.
Pete Wernick was talking about this in the early days of bluegrass festivals in the mid-'60s, and he was coming down from New York down to the South at a time when Northerners coming down to the South was, as part of the whole civil rights struggle, right. And there was a lot of suspicion of Yankees coming down, but he said the music was, what drew them together and, created connections that wouldn't have existed otherwise.
Wow, really pretty cool and important. Is the State Department doing this stuff still? Are they still sponsoring events, big bands going around the world, do you know?
Not so much now. I mean, Delamay was a beneficiary of a good bit of that, but I'm not sure if they've been active that way. Donald Trump's not spending much on anything but himself.
Well, and I mean, I think there's a lot of posts in the State Department that have been unfilled since he took office. Yeah, but Delamay also they have not been that active. They spent a year or two where they, for reasons unrelated to State Department tours, they just weren't that active. There have been some programs within the State Department to find and use music in this way. The tours we did were not part of such a program, but I believe there are or have been more formal arrangements also.
Sure sounds like a good thing to do. Anything else before we wrap up? I don't know if you have any final thoughts or things I didn't ask about or didn't touch on.
It's been a great pleasure to be with you, Jeff, and I don't have anything I need to add. I thank you for the soapbox you already provided.
Same here, okay. I'd say.
All right, well, thanks for Bob Perilla and Ira Gitlin, and really appreciate the time. Great information, and let's hope there'll be more of this happening in the future. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.